Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tim Yoon, and today we're going to talk about the factory design pattern. I'm going to be using a SwiftUI example, which makes this video a bit unique. The example that I'll use is to build a basketball team. You might ask, why do you need to use a factory pattern? Well, the two main reasons. One is to reduce complexity, because sometimes it can take quite a bit of work to initialize an object. So you might just want to make that from a factory. And the other is to decouple the use of the object from the creation of the object. So let's get coding now. So first you want to create a protocol for a player. And the player will have the ability to, let's say, shoot. So func shoot. And then we'll also create an enum, and we call it player type. And it'll be of string type and case. And let's say we'll have a point guard. And there'll be a center, let's say. And we can fill out the rest later. But it's always useful to create a var called text. And it'll return a string. And what we'll do is switch on self. And then we'll wait for a second for Xcode to help us out with this. And it'll give us the stubs. So what we want to do here is return point guard like that. Okay, and for center, we'll say return center. And that'll be nicer. Okay. Next, the player should also have, let's say, a variable, and it'll have a player type. And of course, that'll be of player type. And we'll say that you can only get this variable. So this will be a let variable, because once you create it, you can't change it. Okay, so now we got that player. The next thing is then we want to actually create concrete examples of each of these player types that we have here. So we'll create a struct, and let's say it'll be a center player, and that will be of type player. And so we'll get a little error message here, and we can just implement these things just like that. So then here we're going to say, print the center shoots. And basically here is where you're going to put in the logic for shooting for a center, right? Okay, very good. And then here, the player type will be, instead of a var, it'll be a let. And we'll say it'll have to be a center, like that. The next thing is that we'll just copy this over and create a point guard. Just like that. And I don't want to call it a point guard player, so I'll just call it a player. And maybe here I'll call this a center instead of a center player. Okay, that's better. And then instead of being a center, this one will be a point guard. And then here, instead of shooting for a center, it'll be shooting logic for a point guard. And we're going to say the point guard shoots. Okay. All right, so now we've got a center and we've got a point guard. Next thing we're going to do is create a factory. So let's create a class. We'll call it a player factory. And it's going to have something called a func called the make player. Okay. And when you do that, it's going to return to you a player, which is actually a protocol, not a concrete object. And what we're going to do is say, hey, the kind of player type will be the parameter inside this function. So it'd be player type like that. Now, what we do is we'll switch on the player type. And we'll give that a second, and that should give us the code completion block right here. And so what we'll have is, if it's going to create a point guard, we want to return a point guard. Oops, point guard, and return a center. Now for this example, it's pretty simple to make a point guard in the center, but what if you had to have put in the various different statistics, you know, height and weight and shooting percentage, free throw shooting percentage, and all these different kind of things? It becomes kind of painful to have to put all of that to create a point guard, you know? So you would put all of that pain once into the factory, and then you can just call it to just make yourself a player like that. Okay. So at this point, we can start using this factory inside of a view. And there are many different ways to do this. We could actually use an MVVM design pattern here, but we'll just keep it simple. And we'll say let factory equals player factory. Right, just like that. And then we need a state variable here, private var, and we'll say players, and that'll be an array of player. And we'll set that to an empty array to start with. Okay. Now let's go in here, get rid of this, and say vstack. And what we'll have is first some buttons to create each of these players. So let's say a spacer, so that this will be at the bottom, and it'll be an H stack. And we'll have two buttons. The first button will be to make a point guard. So let's see, a button point guard like that. And inside of it, the action will be what? Well, it'll be, we have to create a player. So what we'll say is player equals, okay, hang on a second, let player equals factory dot make player, and the type is going to be dot point guard, just like that. And then we're going to add that to the players array. So it'll be players dot append player, just like that. Boom. And that will give us a point guard button. And then here we're going to have make a center here like so. And you know what? Let's do a button style to make things look a little nicer. Dot bordered, just like that. Good. And now we got a center and a point guard, and the player will, instead of making a point guard, will be a center here. Now, that gives us the ability to add players to the player list. And let's see if it can display that. Okay, so what we'll say is a v stack, and it'll be a for each players. So instead of that, we'll go dot dot, it's from 0 to less than players dot count, and then it'll be ID will be dot self. And what we'll say is that player will probably need to be hashable in order for this to work. Here we go. All right. Index in. You know what? Maybe you don't need to be hashable because this ID is an integer in this count. So let's get rid of this hashable thing right here. I don't think we need it. Let's go back. All right. Now we're going to say we'll make a v stack. And we'll have a text that displays the players, oops, players, and then we'll use the index dot player type dot text. All right, so now we'll go over here. If we add a point guard, boom, there it is. There's a point guard. We add a center. another center like that. So we got a team there. Wonderful. I like it. Now, you're going to see that to make this a little nicer, what I'm going to do is create an image. And the image will be we'll use this. And string interpolation, player index dot player type dot raw value. Okay, so the raw value is this stuff right here. Player type is a string, and it's going to be either point guard or center. And what I did was went ahead and just created a center with Shaquille O'Neal's face in there, a point guard with Steph Curry's face right there. So then we'll be able to use that and create a little picture to make things look a little nicer. And let's see, point guard. Whoa, Steph Curry shows up, but he's just a little too big. So let's make it resizable. And then we'll make it fit to the scale to fit. And then we'll give it a frame. And let's say we'll give it a width of, let's say 60 and height of 60. And let's see what that looks like. Point guard, perfect, center, point guard, center. Excelente. And there you have it. We have an example of a factory pattern. And let's see, here's the player factory. It's quite easy, actually. Make player, and then it reproduces these players, which is an abstraction of these concrete objects. Center, which is a player, point guard, that's a player. So what does that mean? That means that select team view can have an array of player, and that gives you that decoupling. And we do know that player will have certain functions as defined by the player right here. The protocol will have a player type and the ability to shoot. And so if you needed to have your team shoot, well, you could make it happen by calling the shoot function. Later on, what you could do then is several things. You can include other player types, like a small forward, power forward, a shooting guard, those kinds of things can go in there. And then you could also put in, for instance, you could put in, a func for a dribble, all kinds of different things to extend your functionality. But here you go. It's this, the factory pattern is pretty simple to understand. And it can be very useful in certain circumstances. And you're going to hear about factory patterns a lot. So here we have it with an example using SwiftUI. Hope this was helpful. Please click on the like button and make some comments below. That'll encourage me to make some more videos. Signing off. Take care.